Welcome to the It's All About Missions podcast with Brady Van Winkle, as we endeavor to talk about missions and the need for the gospel all around the world. We hope we can help you find your place in world evangelism. And for questions or for more information, please check out it'sallaboutmissions.com. And now we hope you enjoy the show. Hello, and thank you for joining us on this week's episode of It's All About Missions, Country of the Week, Country Spotlight. As we are going to South America, we are looking at the country of Ecuador. And many people may know a little bit about Ecuador. They may not know a lot about Ecuador, but there's a great need for the gospel of Ecuador. And again, Ecuador has a population of around 16 million people. The official language there is obviously Spanish, but they also have the tribal language that is spoken called Quechua. And the capital city is Quito. And guys, if you're Hispanic or you know these and I'm saying them wrong, I do apologize. I'm doing my best. Quito. The largest city is Guayaquil. Both those cities have well over 2 million people in them. But there's a need for the gospel there. Basically, majority of the country is going to be, about 75% of the country is Roman Catholic. And then on top of that, you have a wide variety of other religions that are there to add to that. What's sad, though, is I just heard the statistic recently about the country of Ecuador, that basically in 1995, there were quite a few missionaries there, a good number of missionaries there. In 2003, that number drastically fell, but now there's less than, I believe, 20 missionaries going to the country of Ecuador, and there's just a great need for the gospel. In less than 30 years, the number has drastically fell from well over 100 to under 20 missionaries working in the country, and there's a need for the gospel. You say, but it's Latin America, it's South America. There's been missionaries that have gone there for years, and they've reached with the gospel, yes, but it hasn't reached with the gospel. Because if it hadn't reached with the gospel, there wouldn't be 75% still Roman Catholic. No, there needs to be hundreds upon thousands of missionaries all across Latin America that are going there to plant churches that are seeing people, that are seeing Ecuadorians and people all across Latin America raised up to reach them with the gospel. There's a need in the country of Ecuador because these people are blind and they are lost without the gospel because they are just going around trying to work. They're trying to do all these things. They try to please God and try to please the priest and try to please the church and the Catholic Church, all of this stuff. The reality is, if they die without Christ, they will die and spend eternity in hell. And that should break your heart. That should make you be like, oh, that is so sad. That is horrible. And it is horrible. But we should be doing all that we can to see Ecuador reach for the gospel in this generation. I want you to join us this week in praying for Ecuador. Let's pray for the people of Ecuador. Let's pray that God will open their eyes and that they will turn from their sin. They will be looking for the truth. Let's also pray for the missionaries. They're ones that are either there, they're going to be there, that God will use them in a mighty way to see men raised up, to see Ecuadorian people raised up. And these Ecuadorian men will go out and they will plant churches and see men trained, and that God will do a great work. Let's pray for the Ecuadorian pastors that are already there, that God will strengthen them, that God will give them boldness, that God will use them in a great and mighty way. Let's pray for the Ecuadorian Christians, that they'll be bold to share the gospel with their friends, their family members, their co-workers, people that they come in contact with, and that God will do a great work in the country of Ecuador, and that we can see Ecuador reach with the gospel, in this generation. There's a need there. And I ask you just to pray for the country of Ecuador. Let's pray that God will reach it. And you know why it's called Ecuador is because it's right on the equator. It runs right there across the equator, right smack dab in the middle of the earth. But you know what? The people there are still lost without Christ. But we can pray that God will do a great work there, and then we can pray that God will send people and that God will do something. I don't ask you to pray that God will work in your heart about what part you would have in helping to see Ecuador reach with the gospel. What can you do? What will you do? Will you go take a mission trip there? Will you give your life to go there? Will you give some money? I would ask you to pray about if God would have you to be a missionary to the country of Ecuador. And I'd also challenge you this. We need to pray for Ecuador to reach the gospel. We need to be praying for the whole world to reach the gospel. But also not only should we be praying for these countries and the whole world, but we should be doing all that we can. And that includes going to church. That includes being involved in your church. That includes giving and tithing and sharing the gospel and discipling people. And I hope that as you listen to these, that you're doing all that you can to help see the world reach the gospel in this generation, because time is short, Christ is coming back, and people are dying and going to hell without Christ. But you know what? With God, all things are possible, and we can see the world reach with the gospel in this generation. Thank you so much for joining us on this episode of It's All About Missions. And we'd like to ask you to do a couple things for us. The first thing I ask you to do, if you haven't already, please make sure to subscribe so you can stay up to date when all of our new episodes drop. And that way, as a new episode comes, you'll get a notification that lets you know, hey, we've got a new episode of It's All About Missions. Second thing I ask you to do, if you haven't yet, please make sure to leave us a review. These reviews are very vital, and they help us out, and they help other people to see us in the podcast player of choice. They'll see us and see those reviews and say, hey, I want to check out this podcast. And lastly, one other thing I'd like you to do, why don't you share us with a friend, a family member, somebody you know, and say, hey, why don't you go over and check out It's All About Missions? missions. That'll help us grow our audience, help people to know more about It's All About Missions. And guess what? It'll help more people get involved in reaching the world with the gospel. I want to challenge you to know that the Bible, it's all about missions. And as a Christian, your life should be all about missions. And what are you going to do to impact the world with the gospel in this generation?